of Brazilian women march in rejection of the government's land policies. Alison West is named Trinidad and Tobago's Public Administration Minister after a week of confusion. And after 13 days at sea, the open arms migrant rescue vessel has been permitted entry to Italian waters. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. Thousands of Brazilian women have taken to the streets of Brasilia for the Margaritas March. They were rejecting the government's policies against rural communities and indigenous land rights. Campesinos, trade unions, and feminist movements came together to reject the neoliberal project of the administration of the far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. This year, the demonstrators are defending their historic rights, which are being threatened by the current government. The Margaritas March is called every 4 years by a variety of movements and trade unions representing rural women. Our correspondent Danay Galetti has more from Brasilia.
We are here in the avenue of the ministries in Brasilia, where more than 100,000 women have been marching, not just rural women, but also indigenous women. They were demanding recent pensions, which they also have a right to, as well as free quality education, which was the theme of Tuesday's big march here in Brasilia. They were also marching in defense of water and land rights, in favor of agroecology and land reform, and against all the policies of President Jair Bolsonaro that they see as an attack on the rights they have won. The women are also protesting against gender violence. Brazil has one of the highest rates of femicides in the world, and that figure has risen even further this year. So those are the issues raised on this Margaritas March, which is named after Margarita Alves, an activist and agricultural worker who was murdered in 1983 and who struggled for many of the same causes.
We thank Danay Galetti for that report. Thousands of students and teachers marched in cities across Brazil on Tuesday to protest against proposed federal cuts in education spending. This was the third nationwide march against the cuts since they were proposed by President Jair Bolsonaro back in May. Our correspondent Brian Muir followed the demonstrators.
On August 13th, students and union members took to the streets of over 200 Brazilian cities to protest the far-right Bolsonaro government's proposed austerity cuts to the education system.
The risk of these cuts is that education will lose its public, democratic, and free characteristics. The backdrop of this education plan is the destruction of the public nature of Brazilian schools and universities. They don't want education to be a right for all. They want to transform it into a privilege for a few. So we are here to protest against this and guarantee that all Brazilian people can have access to schools and universities.
The protest was called Education Tsunami and was organized by student unions. It started early in the morning in small towns and moved to bigger cities as the day progressed. Thousands of people from all walks of life came out in solidarity with the students.
I'm here today for the future of my daughter. I have a 4-year-old daughter and I don't want her to live in a country that has a fascist president and a government. I love and fight for this country.
This was the third national student and teacher strike since Jair Bolsonaro became president. As his government becomes further and further engulfed in corruption scandals, the students hope these demonstrations can stop him from purging the educational curriculum of critical thinking and halt the austerity cuts.
We want to pressure the government, and I think that if we continue this fight, we will achieve results. We will be able to draw attention to the problem and reduce the cuts.
Brian Muir, Telesur, São Paulo.
Moving on, the president of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, has announced salary hikes and tax cuts to help ease a spiraling economy. This follows a critical loss during primary elections on Sunday to the left-wing Frente de Todos party and ahead of presidential elections in October. The president also apologized for comments he made on Monday in which he blamed voters and not his neoliberal policies for the many issues the country's economy faces.
The measures I take and that I'm going to share with you now are because I listened to you. I heard what you wanted to tell me on Sunday. These are measures that will bring relief to 17 million workers and their families and to all small and medium businesses that I know are going through a moment of great uncertainty. I want to apologize for what I said at the conference on Monday. I hesitated to do it because I was still very much affected by Sunday's results and not having slept and saddened by the consequences it had on the economy.
Our correspondent in Buenos Aires, Sabrina Rojas.
Following announcements made by President Macri, the value of the peso has dropped again as the country's risk rating continues to rise. The president also apologized for his controversial media conference on Monday, where he blamed citizens for the economy's woes after he received widespread condemnation. Nonetheless, the new economic measures he announced on Wednesday are very much designed to sway voters in his favor and will last at most for 3 months, and it will not impact the finances of Argentinian households. Since Macri took power, the peso has devalued by 500%, as experts agree that due to this week's downturn, this year's inflation rate is expected to reach 50%. Meanwhile, during Macri's administration, salaries have remained stagnant in the face of rising inflation, while retirees and small and medium-sized businesses will hardly benefit from his newly announced measures.
So let's take a closer look at President Macri's measures to win back voters, which include tax breaks, bonuses, and a higher minimum wage. The threshold for employees and pensioners to begin paying income tax will rise by 20%. The government says that should benefit 2 million people with an extra $30 to $40 a month. Employees' contributions to Social Security will also be suspended for September and October, benefiting 6.5 million people who will see an extra $30 to $40 in their pockets. Informal workers will benefit through extra child benefits. 2.2 million parents will receive an extra $10 to $15 a month per child. Civil servants, the police, and members of the armed forces will get a bonus of $100 at the end of the month. And the minimum wage will rise, but the government still has to decide when and by how much. There are also benefits for small and medium-sized businesses and for students on grants, and gasoline prices will be frozen for 90 days. All these short-term measures run directly contrary to the terms of President Macri's $57 billion bailout agreement with the International Monetary Fund. But the IMF is likely to turn a blind eye, as it would certainly prefer a market-friendly Macri to be re-elected than deal with a return of the left. Moving on, the economic woes, staying in Argentina, the economic woes in Argentina are just one of the factors that have caused stock markets in the United States to plunge. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has fallen 780 points in the course of the day, while Standard & Poor's lost almost 3%. New figures showing a negative growth in Germany and Britain have stoked fears of a global recession. The U.S. trade war on China had already unnerved the markets. Still to come, gang members hand over arms and ammunition to police and say Kitts and Nevis don't go away. Welcome back. Trinidad and Tobago has appointed Alison West as Public Administration Minister after the previous office holder was charged for corruption last week. West will also retain her position as Junior Minister in the Ministry of Finance. Earlier this week, the government appointed Senator Garibin Simonet to the post. However, his swearing-in ceremony was cancelled after news surfaced that in 2014 he was arrested in the U.S. for driving under the influence. The original office holder, Marlene McDonald, is currently facing charges for misappropriation of state funds, along with her partner and 3 other contractors.
Let's make it real.
For the first time in St. Kitts and Nevis' crime-fighting history, gang members on the island have handed over 30 illegal guns to the police. 30 rounds of assorted ammunition was also handed over to law enforcement via a trusted third party. It's all part of the government's ongoing peace initiative. In addition to the 30 illegal firearms handed over in recent weeks, 13 guns and assorted ammunition were discovered by security forces throughout the year. Both the Prime Minister and the Commissioner of Police have described the development as a major breakthrough in the fight against crime.
The last batch of weapons was secured last Friday, August 9. And I understand that this batch of 30 guns was given up voluntarily as a demonstration of the commitment by gang members to the peace of our beloved country.
To date, the police have received 30 firearms and 73 rounds of sorted ammunition. Such an exercise has never taken place in the history of the police force of our country. These weapons will undergo a process and will subsequently be destroyed.
Moving on, the Peace Commission of the Colombian Senate is traveling to the Department of Cauca to investigate the violence that has killed several social leaders in recent days. The delegation will be accompanied by the Ombudsman, Carlos Negret. They will meet local indigenous and community leaders as well as campesino and Afro-Colombian movements to address the issue.
We're going to be on the ground, firstly to talk to the indigenous communities, to the indigenous guards, to the CRIC and other organizations, as well as the local government. Secondly, these talks will allow us to make a much better diagnosis of what is going on in Cauca. Thirdly, we need a much clearer understanding of this violence that is killing social leaders in Cauca and not just accept the simplistic and, in my opinion, irresponsible explanations offered by the government.
What is most worrying is that they continue to deny that there is a problem of targeted murders, which are planned with lists of names in their hands of social leaders who are being killed. We ourselves are victims of genocide, and it's not just about someone pulling the trigger. There may be authorities who are responsible because they let the killings happen or even collaborate with intelligence information, providing weapons or simply not stopping the vehicles with no number plates that circulate. In Cauca, in Catatumbo, sometimes in Potamayo, this is a way of allowing these killings.
On Tuesday, the National Commission of Safety Guarantees was held in Colombia, even as the systematic killing of social leaders continues unabated. A report of the Institute for Peace and Development shows that over 200 activists have been murdered in Colombia in the past year under President Iván Duque's watch. We have more in this report.
Some say the National Commission of Safety Guarantees is ineffective and that Colombia's government has not had the will to implement the Commission's recommendations.
Sadly, the National Commission of Safety Guarantees is not working. We can't talk about a very important national organization that is supposed to guarantee the safety of leaders and the dismantling of those groups that attack them, yet they cannot create a positive outcome.
This is the second time the Commission was held under the government of President Iván Duque. Its main focus was supposed to be the ongoing crisis of social leaders' murders.
It's not being recognized simply because it's not coming from the peace agreement. They don't like guests that come from civil society. The Peace and Reconciliation Foundation used to be a usual guest, but we haven't been invited again. And the government is just holding this event out of mere obligation and is not using it as a platform to hear the concerns of civil society.
Many question whether Colombia's government has a concrete plan to either dismantle or take legal action against paramilitary groups. These, even as early warnings, are being ignored by the Ombudsman's office.
There's a need to dismantle their structures that have been immune. In a way, it can allow us to stop paramilitarism from recurring in Colombia. We talk about structures of economic beneficiaries of these groups. We talk about political structures, and we talk about the entrenchment of these groups in sectors of the Colombian state.
The seeming indifference of government officials has only added to this dilemma, to the extent that it re-victimizes social leaders and also justifies the murders of former guerrillas.
However, many of the officials that work in this government believe that social leaders are terrorists, loafers, who don't work, which means that there is an ideological bias against these social leaders, and that is what is causing this.
Word on the ground is that the government would be seeking to intensify war in the regions in an effort to justify and push legislative reforms that go against the peace agreement.
In Mexico, a judge has ordered that former Social Development Minister Rosario Robles be detained pending a trial over corruption. Robles is accused of taking part in an embezzlement scandal that saw about $260 million diverted from welfare program funds during the presidency of Enrique Peña Nieto. This is the highest profile arrest of a politician since President Andrés Manuel López Obrador took office in 2018, promising to eradicate corruption.
I believe it's an accomplishment that there is no impunity, that authentic rule of law exists, not like before, which has a crooked state of bribes.
And still in Mexico, the government has provided a report on the deployment of the recently created National Guard and the different tasks they will be carrying out. Since its creation earlier this year, the new security body, made up of military, naval, and federal police, has been criticized by a number of social organizations.
President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says the National Guard is a key tool in reducing the violence and insecurity that has plagued Mexico since 2006, when the so-called war against drug trafficking started.
We didn't have a protection service for citizens. What we had was a 10,000-strong federal police that was never put into action by the state to protect the people.
Head of the National Guard, Commander Luis Rodriguez Bucio, says the new security body has over 50,000 members spread across 150 out of the 266 special regional divisions created to better combat crime.
These new regional divisions are mostly concentrated in the central and southern regions of Mexico, which is where the National Guard is also carrying out most of its operations to provide security for all citizens.
The National Guard is also already active in various areas of Mexico City.
Their presence serves as a deterrent, but it's still too early to say if things will improve. They have a lot of work ahead of them because crime has been allowed to run out of control.
I've seen the National Guard working on the edges of the city, like Iztapalapa, where they are capturing small-time criminals, but they still have to take action against crime bosses. I hope this government can actually take them down.
Nonetheless, human rights activists and some experts have questioned whether the National Guard has the ability to fight what has been allowed to become a crisis for most Mexicans.
They are focusing on what are basically hotspots in some states, what are basically emergency situations. And on the other hand, they are dealing with issues that were not initially on their agenda, like the migration issue.
Since the National Guard's rollout, the government has announced little progress in the fight against crime. In July alone, over 2,400 homicides were reported in Mexico. On top of this, the National Guard has itself been attacked by criminal gangs on a number of occasions, with at least one member losing his life.
After the break, Pakistan criticizes India during its independence celebrations. Don't go away. Welcome back. An Italian court has authorized the open arms migrant rescue ship to enter Italian waters. The vessel has spent 13 days stranded at sea with over 140 migrants on board after far-right Italian leader Matteo Salvini prevented them from entering Italian waters. A migrant family of 4 was evacuated earlier in the day off the ship in the Mediterranean after one of the babies developed respiratory problems. Meanwhile, another 365 migrants are still stranded on the Ocean Viking, Doctors Without Borders, and SOS Mediterranean ships off the coast of Libya since Friday. Last week, the United Nations Refugee Agency called on European governments to intervene and help the migrants, warning that storms were approaching.
We have overturned Salvini's decree, which banned us from entering Italian waters under the threat of confiscating our boat. We can now enter Italian waters without fear of being fined or having our boat confiscated. This is what I am saying, and also the ruling says these people must be disembarked. but it does not say in which port. Therefore, it's the Italian government which must respond to its administration, its justice system. We shall see how it evolves over the next hours. We'll see what happens. It's important that this decree, which was boosted about so much as a great success, has turned to nothing.
The Iranian oil tanker illegally detained by the United Kingdom in Gibraltar could be released. A hearing is scheduled for July 15th to discuss the fate of the Grace 1 tanker. The Iranian Fars news agency speculated that the vessel could be released on Tuesday night. Iran called Britain's move an act of privacy. One day after violent protesters attacked police, tourists, and even held a journalist hostage at Hong Kong's airport, flights have resumed and a court ordered that most of the protesters be cleared out. Still, some remain inside in especially designated areas. Activists and union leaders have strongly condemned the actions of these protesters, saying they are now only hoping to provoke the Chinese government and are greatly damaging Hong Kong's reputation abroad.
As a journalist, Fu Guohao should not be prevented or confined by anybody when visiting Hong Kong. The violent attack is a provocation to mainland compatriots and journalists. The rioters sieged the airport, disrupted the normal order there, and forced all flights to be cancelled, only aiming to the so-called expression of views. It's a kind of violence that is not allowed by the whole of Hong Kong and the world. We must condemn it strongly.
Bad manners and injuring others are not allowed in modern Hong Kong society. If tourists from all around the world know that they can be threatened at the Hong Kong airport, they will not come to Hong Kong anymore.
Meanwhile, the former chief executive of Hong Kong has called on the region's silent majority to speak out against violent protesters, as they are not a representative of the region as a whole.
I think it is also important for the silent majority of Hong Kong to come out and speak out, so that we have enough weight of public opinion to stop these people from repeating these totally senseless and brutal activities at our airport. The gangsters, the people who assaulted the users of the airport last night, are not representative of Hong Kong. By far the majority of Hong Kong people are peace-loving and law-abiding. And that is why we must bring these people to justice.
The Nigerian Shiite leader Ibrahim Zakzaki has reportedly been denied access to his personal doctors in India as he receives medical treatment in the country. Zakzaki was granted approval to leave the country for treatment last week. He and his wife, Esena, have been in custody since December 2015 after protests saw the army kill 350 of his followers. The Islamic movement in Nigeria says police are guarding him at the hospital, adding that he is receiving treatment from people he does not know or trust.
He saw some doctors he doesn't know, and he's not comfortable with those doctors, and we are not comfortable with that. We want Sheikh Zakzaki to allow to see his personal doctors. They were there, but they blocked them. They didn't allow them access to the Sheikh. Police were fully armed at the entrance of the hall where they keep the Sheikh, and they didn't allow these doctors to see him.
As Pakistan celebrates its 73rd Independence Day, President Arif Alvi took the opportunity to criticize India for its actions in the Kashmir region in his address to the nation. The main flag hosting the ceremony was held in Islamabad. In his speech, Alvi emphasized Pakistan's unflinching support for the Kashmiri people until they get the right to self-determination. He also warned India about any belligerent moves.
Until they get their right to self-determination, we will not leave them alone. Kashmiris are ours, and we belong to the Kashmiris. We feel their pain as our pain, their agony as our agony, and all their tears fall on our hearts. We were with them in the past, and we will be with them now. And God willing, we will be with them forever.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.